hi everyone, welcome if you're just filtering in. We'll be starting at 6:30, so you've still got time to go get a drink or a snack if you want to. It's always lovely to see some people who arrived when we first launched. So yeah, thanks so much for being here today, everyone. And we'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. Well, it's just come on to tell me that we're now on Facebook Live, which is great news. And yeah, we'll just be starting in a second or so. Thanks so much for joining us. Great. Well, so I think it has just turned 6:30, so I'm going to get started. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's event, which is Housing for the Future, How Can the Northwest Become More Climate Ready? My name's Julia and I'm part of the team at Hope for the Future. If you haven't heard of us before, Hope for the Future is a climate communications charity which works nationally to equip communities and individuals to communicate the urgency of climate change with their local politicians. We feel like it's really, really important that MPs and constituents can have rich and challenging conversations about the climate. And we facilitate this by providing training for individuals and local groups, as well as tailored support at every stage of the journey. So we'll support you to write your first letter, attend a meeting with your local politician, and also that all important following up afterwards. As part of our work, we also support groups and individuals to organise local events, a lot like this one that you're here tonight with us. You can find out more about the events and how we can support you in engaging your MP by visiting our website, which is www.hftf.org.uk, and you can see some of it on the screen right now. And I'd also just like to say a big thank you to the European Climate Foundation, who fund our core work and have helped us to make tonight possible. Real. And then what brings us here today? We all know that 2020 and 2021 have been really difficult years for all of us, and we're still in the middle of a public health crisis. As we look forward to a green recovery from COVID-19, retrofitting homes and ensuring people have safe, clean and green places to live is really essential. At Hope for the Future, we work with hundreds of people across Northwest England, and over the last 12 months, we've supported over 30 communities to engage 30 MPs since we got going in Liverpool, which is our second regional office. Over the next 12 months, we want to make even more of a difference. And from listening to you, to politicians and the experts in the field, some of whom are joining us tonight, we understand that fuel poverty is a really important, pertinent issue in this region. The Northwest of England has some of the highest national fuel poverty rates in the UK, that's at 14.5%, and some of the poorest quality housing in the UK, housing that isn't yet climate ready. In March of this year, we were delighted to organise an event in St Helens, South and Whiston, alongside Marie Rimmer MP and her constituents, which you can see on the screen there. The focus of the event was on fuel poverty, retrofitting homes, and the link with meeting our climate targets. The event was a huge success and prompted the question, what next? And that's part of why we are here tonight. We know that we need the finances, resources and skills directed to the Northwest to tackle fuel poverty, create jobs and reduce carbon emissions from our homes. With support from our partners, we're aiming to support as many people as possible to engage their local politicians on home energy efficiency over the next 12 months, with the aim of building a network of MPs across the region to ensure the government's retrofit targets are met. The event tonight marks the first stage of this journey, and so we thank you so much for joining us. We've had a huge amount of interest, and we're so pleased to welcome so many of you attending live, although this event is also being recorded, and so it will be available on demand. Before we get started, I'd like to talk you through the schedule very quickly. We're delighted that we'll be first joined by industry experts Stephanie Beard and Jan Pennington from the Low Carbon Academy, and they'll set the scene on retrofit in the Northwest. We'll be hearing from Johnny Webb, the Senior Research Fellow at IPPR North, to set the national context of the UK's housing stock. Steve Rotheram, Metropolitan Mayor of Liverpool, was unfortunately unable to join us live this evening, but he has pre-recorded his talk for us, focusing on ensuring the climate-ready homes for the city region. And we're also really pleased to be joined by Kit Knowles, Director of Ecospheric, who will be giving an overview of Ecospheric work in pioneering eco-developments and retrofit solutions, which can be translated across the country. There'll be opportunities for you to participate as well. After we've heard from the Low Carbon Academy, we'll be using an interactive system to ask you what kind of future you envision for communities in the Northwest. In the final section of the event, my colleague Laura Dehenin, who's unfortunately unable to be with us tonight as it's her birthday, but has recorded a segment, she'll be introducing the Housing for the Future programme, which is this next 12-month project that we have going on. And that'll be inviting you to get involved and engage your MP on these issues. After that, we'll have a Q&A where we'll be taking a couple of pre-submitted questions, but there is also space for some questions that you have live. So if you do have any questions or thoughts throughout any of the speakers' contributions tonight, do please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and then we will try to get them included as part of that Q&A. We'll also be sharing the responses afterwards. Brill. And before I hand over to our first speaker, I'm just going to run through some very quick housekeeping. Obviously online, I don't have to do that there are no fire alarms predicted, but I do need to tell you already again that this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available on demand. You'll be getting a follow-up email from us probably next week with a link to this recording and directing you to some of our key resources, including the report which we are talking about this evening. We'll be doing our absolute best, and I will be quite strict on this to stick to our time this evening, and we're scheduled to finish at 8 p.m. because it is a Friday night after all. And finally, I'd just like to ask that everyone be respectful of all of the contributions in tonight's event from our speakers and from our other attendees. Now, it's time for you to sit back, listen, and take in the messages from our speakers this evening. And do, again, make a note of any questions that you would like to ask later on. On to our first speaker. I'm really delighted to introduce Low Carbon Academy, and they'll be talking about why the Northwest of England is so relevant to the retrofit discussion, and hence why we are all here tonight. I'd like to introduce Stephanie Beard and Jan Pennington from the Low Carbon Academy. Northwest Skills Academy is a construction NVQ provider and construction endpoint assessment service with offices and assessment centres throughout the UK. Their Low Carbon Academy is the retrofit training arm of the Skills Academy. In 2013, they launched in Greater Manchester to upskill construction workers into Green Deal roles, such as advisors and installers of retrofit systems. And they work today to provide retrofit skills to meet carbon net zero targets. Jan and Stephanie will be talking about why the Northwest is so important to the retrofit conversation, looking at the skills gap, finance, and giving us an overview of the work that the Low Carbon Academy does. So I think that is enough introductions from me. If Jan and Stephanie want to come onto their cameras, and I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Julia. Just get the presentation for a second. Can you let me know if you can see that?
Yeah, that's just coming on. Yeah, I can see that. Great.
Lovely. So good evening, everybody. As Julia already said, I'm Jan Pennington. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Northwest Skills and Low Carbon Academy. Tonight, I'm going to give you an overview of Northwest Skills and Low Carbon Academy, our work to date, what the task ahead is, particularly and especially the skills gap we've currently got, and our current offer now and for the future. So as Julia's already said, I just stole my thunder a bit there, we're an NVQ construction training provider, and we've been in business since 2013, and we already have assessed over 6,000 tradespeople in NVQ level 2 to level 6 over those years. We work with learners, employers, construction sector forums, including CITB, National Insulation Association, FENSA, local enterprise partnerships and local authorities to make sure what we're offering is relevant to local, regional and national skills gaps and meets the needs of industry, employers and learners. And that's critical in this, sure we've got the right offer to retrofit job done. Last year we did launch our PA company which offers final assessments. So our Carbon Academy is fit training arm of the academy, and we launched in Greater Manchester to upskill existing construction workers in the Green Deal roles, as Julia's already said. So we've been doing this work for quite a while now, and since then we've upskilled 2,000 individuals across 900 businesses to become retrofit market. We got over 4 learning on retrofit qualifications, supporting business become the latest past 20 as well. So our work and success day includes 555 existing installation workers upskilled to NVQ level 2 since January 2021, and we've done that through the Bays and West Midlands Energy Hub Green Homes Grant Skills Competition. That's a mouthful, isn't it? We've just been awarded, and are really pleased to announce, we're the lead provider for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority for the Retrofit Skills Hub, and it's an ESF Skills for Growth project. We're working together with a number of partners who are all really well known in the retrofit market or up and coming through the retrofit market. The Retrofit Academy, Manchester and Oldham College, and an organisation called Fabric. And we're looking to train 1,140 individuals in retrofit skills for level. So we'll installation, administration, planning, retrofit advisors, panel installation, understanding courses for businesses, because it's critical that businesses change as well the way they operate if we're going to go completely green in the future. We're also lead provider for Greater Manchester Combined Authority DFE Retrofit Skills Boot Camp, which I believe there are construction camps out. It's the first that is retrofit, and we're going to be a partner called Procure 150 new, so people who are new to the sector, and develop the skills of existing construction workers as well to transfer into the retrofit sector. And that's where we see a lot of people moving from existing roles like joinery, bricklaying, upskilling to move into retrofit. So what's the task ahead? And this is the real critical bit. Over the next 15 years, there's 750,000 construction workers who are on the verge of retirement. And using the data from the Climate Change Committee, CITB have estimated that an additional 350,000 workers will be needed in the next 7 years to deliver improvements to existing buildings and reduce that increase of around 30% on the current workforce, ways of working. It has a potential people a valuable opportunity and help us emerge from a time of national crisis due to the pandemic. So this is a really great strand, and all it does is bring obviously the green agenda to the fore and the low carbon agenda to the fore as well. And I'm sure everybody on the news recently do need to make as soon as possible. So it's essential the sector has a pipeline motivated workforce through the sector, the green transition possible. The task ahead continues. In Greater Manchester alone, they're tasked with actually retrofitting 60,000 residential and commercial buildings a year to be zero carbon by 2038. So imagine what the number is across the Northwest. Normative task really become clearer to everybody. Cooperative businesses are the way to fit for the future, but not on the scale, nowhere near scale needed due to financial restrictions, skills shortage and inappropriate supply chains. Local authorities will need to work with contractors, retrofit training providers and communities to make the Northwest green and prosperous, with all stakeholders seeking to find funding to support not just the upskilling of the workforce, but to provide funding to support homeowners and businesses make the step change. And training providers across the Northwest, including our local economy, need to rise to this challenge to support training, upskilling and development required to meet this and achieve the net zero targets that we have in front of us. So what's our retrofit offer currently? We're offering level 2 insulation and building treatment qualifications. I won't read out the list, but everything from cavity wall, wood preserving, damp proofing, internal insulation, fenestration, double glazing, what that is, to make homes more energy efficient. We've currently got an offer of retrofit course, assessor, advanced coordinator, solar thermal systems and heat pump installations, and we've got that critical course which is around carbon literacy for businesses and getting businesses ready for the net zero target as well. That's me, thank you. Are we doing questions now? Yeah.
That was well, Jans. Yeah, sorry, I think we had a few issues with your sound. That was actually, I think we got most of it and the slides were brilliant. But we have probably got time for maybe a quick question. Oh yeah, looks like there's one there. Somebody's asked, are there any courses for smart meter installation?
There are, but we don't offer them, but other training providers are offering them at the moment. I'll try details of who's offering them and send those in to you and pass them out if you'd like.
Great. Yeah, if you could send those over and then we could put that in our follow-up email. Oh, thanks also for your question, Eve, but we're running a tight schedule tonight, so I'll save that one and maybe Will could come to it in the Q&A later. Brilliant. Thank you so much to you, Stephanie and Jan. That was really, really brilliant.
I'm sorry about the sound issues, everybody.
No, not at all. I don't think there's more you could do. You're off camera, and so yeah, no worries at all. Thanks so much. Great. I think we're now going to do a little switcheroo, and we're going to try and do something interactive. So I'll just wait and see if my colleague Aislinn can bring our interactive platform onto the screen. We're doing this because we're really keen to find out a bit more about all of our participants here today. And so during the next few minutes, we're going to have a bit of reflection time where you can contribute your thoughts anonymously to our virtual word cloud. I'm not sure if you've ever used this platform before. It's very clever. In order to answer this question, what kind of future do we want to see for communities in the Northwest? We're looking for any word that comes to mind after that prompt question. If you could type that in by going to mentimeter.com, maybe on your mobile phone, and inputting this code 8563566, or you can actually scan the QR code there. We're so technological here today, and Aislinn's also posted it into the chat. So let me know if you have any issues with that. It's pretty simple once you get onto this website, mentimeter.com, or as I say, you could use our QR code. Let me know, I'll keep an eye on the chat, see how people are getting on. Great. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a think about that and to try and get onto the website. We try to do some, oh, okie dokie, Sandra, sorry about that. If you'd like to put your word into the chat so you can contribute, we'd love to see that. But yes, we're trying to do a bit of technology here, and we want a bit of interactivity even though we are all online. So let's see how we get on. Just give it one more minute. And then hopefully we'll get to see a word cloud in a second. It's always good to try these things. Oh, lovely. Okay, what we warm homes, absolutely. You're in the right place for that. That's definitely what we're talking about tonight. Sustainable, fairer, I love those. Clean air, safe roads, cheap bills, and good houses. That's really well phrased. Really like that. Employment, definitely. And what a great thing to follow our great previous speaker with. Regenerative economy, yes, absolutely. Happy and well paid in green jobs, and to be able to afford changes to our lives we need to make sure that our children's futures are secure. I love that, really well put. And self-reliant local supply chains. And from the chat, participatory approach to beneficiaries. Yes, absolutely. I love that. And this is going to be really helpful for us in our project that we're running over the next 12 months, thinking about Northwest retrofitting and all of these sorts of issues. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. We're sending around a follow-up email afterwards, so you can let us know in that what you thought of this Mentimeter, and just like that little quick bit of engagement. Great. Sorry, I've realised I've not turned. It's getting dark here in Sheffield, and I need to turn the light on. There we go. Hopefully you can see me a little bit better now. And yeah, we will be sharing this word cloud with everyone in our follow-up email as well. Great. So we're now on to our next speaker, and I'm really pleased to welcome Johnny Webb. Johnny is a senior research fellow at IPPR North, where he currently leads a programme of work all around net zero. He has a background in housing and homelessness policy and continues to undertake research and provide comment on a wide range of housing and homelessness issues. In IPPR's London office, Johnny contributed widely to the work of IPPR's Environmental Justice Commission, and previously he was based at the Wales Centre for Public Policy. In this role, he worked closely with the Welsh Government, ministers and public services to help connect policymakers with evidence and improve their capacity to make evidence-informed decisions. Johnny's talk will outline the environmental, societal and economic case for housing retrofit. First outlining the need for a national housing retrofit strategy before giving examples of the regional and local benefits can bring. How brilliant. Thanks so much, Johnny, for joining us. I think that we can see you now, so that's absolutely great. And I think that you have a couple of slides, so I'll just wait for those to come on the screen. Great. I also think we might have had a tiny typo in our slides, so you'll have to forgive us for that. Great. I'll hand over to you, Johnny.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, so what I'm going to try and zoom through super quick for everyone is essentially what Julie just outlined. So basically starting with the national case for retrofit, before getting a little bit into what the regional benefits would be and the local benefits, as well as based on our research outlining a plan to do that. So probably a good place to start is with the national picture. So last year we did a fairly big piece of research, essentially looking at housing retrofit in England. So in terms of what the national picture looks like, I'm going to start with the positives, because I think you should always start with the positives when it comes to retrofit, because there are so many positives. Our analysis suggests that a national retrofit programme could create about 275,000 jobs in England by 2035. So really, you know, there's a massive amount of job generating potential from a national retrofit strategy. But in terms of the scale of the challenge, It's quite difficult to ascertain the precise number of homes that will need retrofitting, but at the very kind of most conservative estimates, probably about 63% of homes will need some level of retrofitting. That will range from everything from, in some cases, it might just be the case of replacing a gas boiler with a new low carbon heating system. In other cases, it might be far more comprehensive. So, you know, if you think of places like Sheffield or Liverpool or Manchester, where we have lots of 2 up, 2 down terrace houses, retrofitting those sorts of properties will be far more intensive than retrofitting newer properties that perhaps have, you know, better forms of insulation, things like cavity wall insulation, just because of the nature of the buildings and the age of the buildings. To achieve net zero housing, we're probably going to have to undertake about 21 million separate energy efficiency measures. And that's just in relation to low carbon heating. Of those 21 million separate measures, approximately 19 million heat pumps will need to be installed. I'm not going to get in too much into the detail of what a heat pump is because I don't have too long, but essentially the best way to think about it is it works a little bit like a fridge in reverse. So it basically takes cold air from the outside and turns it into warm air. It's really important in terms of when we think about the national picture about how we will finance the transition. So it's going to have to be a transition where the government certainly, you know, plays its part and incentivizes people to undertake these measures and supports lower income households in particular through things like grants and low cost loans to be able to retrofit their homes, and also work with landlords, both social landlords and private landlords, to ensure that they're retrofitting their housing stock. But more broadly, in particular, think about homeowners, there's also a need to offer incentives there. So we need to make housing retrofit attractive. We need to start explaining to people why it's better that they have, you know, a warm home that's energy efficient and show the benefits that it can bring. If we get this right, though, not only are we going to improve people's healths and reduce their energy bills, which is great, we're also going to reach net zero. So, you know, there's a lot of positives that come with this transition. In terms of just, you know, I've kind of gone over the context for action, and you know, there's obviously different reasons for why we need to do this, but I think this is quite topical given, you know, what's been going on in the news recently in terms of thinking about things like rising energy bills. One of the most positive benefits of a retrofit program, in my view, is the fact that it will have a positive impact in terms of tackling fuel poverty. So just looking at the north of England alone, almost 1 million households, 731,000 households live in fuel poverty. That's above the England average. That's a combination of both people's lower incomes, but also the fact that their properties cost more to heat. It's the highest in the Northwest. So in the Northwest, fuel poverty rates are the highest when compared to anywhere in the country. And if we look at Liverpool, that has the highest fuel poverty rate in the North, as well as the 3rd highest nationally. So there's specific areas in the North which have, you know, very high rates of fuel poverty. So in terms of what this looks like, it's probably good to kind of talk about what a plan for housing retrofit could look like at the national level. So for us, it has to be a 10-year plan, initially driven by government through what we would call a decarbonisation stimulus. So essentially what we mean by that is that government should invest now to decarbonise homes, and over the course of this decade, we'll start to see more housing stock retrofitted. But then we'll see after this decade that more private actors will start to come in and play their role in supporting retrofit. So that means things like banks offering wider availability of things like green mortgages and other incentives to ensure that homeowners play their part. We think in particular that both social housing providers and combined or local authorities have a really key role to play in this transition. Reason for that is kind of twofold. First of all, the social housing providers, a lot of them already have the expertise and the skills, and most importantly, the maintenance teams to carry out this work. So our vision is that you could start doing this in the social rented sector before scaling it up and applying it across other tenures. And the reason we need local authorities is because fundamentally they're in the best position to audit housing stock in local authority areas and identify where retrofit is most needed. We think that we should prioritise the use of domestic heat pumps. That's because there's fewer barriers than other technological pathways. We're not relying on things like hydrogen fuel, which, you know, the evidence suggests we won't be able to really develop that in the quantities we need for domestic heat. Or if we can, it's probably going to be far too late to avert the worst of climate breakdown. But I think the other thing we'd really emphasise is that alongside installing heat pumps, we need to carry out retrofit measures to improve energy efficiency, raise awareness of them, and really take a fabric first approach to retrofit. So that means focusing first and foremost on the building materials in buildings, how we can add things like insulation. And actually it's in those areas where we see the creation for new jobs to be the highest. So just to give quickly an example of what this plan could look like in the north. I'm not going to go through all the figures, but essentially a 10-year programme for the north of England would cost about 1.18 billion per annum. You could achieve this through various ways. There's existing grant schemes which can be extended. But crucially, and we've heard this already, it's about developing a stronger and responsive skills system. And that really comes back to the local level. Do we have the local plans in place to ensure that we've got the supply of skilled installers that we need for things like heat pumps, as well as other measures such as, you know, carrying out solid wall insulation, cavity wall insulation, all of those other tasks that we need. So really, actually, it's not just about looking at the technologies we need in local areas, it's about looking at the skills we have in local areas and making sure we're developing those skills. And finally, I'd just draw attention on this slide to the impacts. Probably the most important one there is the job creation potential. Again, that's a lot of jobs created across the north of England. And I think that's really something that we should sell as a positive in this transition, that it's not just a benefit to individual households, but actually if we can get the financing of this right, there's significant job creating potential too. And I'm going to leave it there because I think I've almost used my 10 minutes, but I look forward to the Q&A session later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I think you are actually a minute or two ahead of schedule, which is amazing. And so if anybody did have a question for Johnny in the Q&A, we might be able to take one, or we could move on and we can do it in the Q&A later. Oh yeah, completely agree. Very inspiring, someone said to us. Great. I think my colleague Ashna is having some slight technical difficulties, which is always the way. And so it's just needs me to share my screen for the Steve Rotheram video. As I said earlier, unfortunately, Steve Rotheram wasn't able to be here tonight, but he has kindly agreed to be interviewed by our Northwest Regional Coordinator, Laura. And so I'm just going to check that it should be me doing this. Yeah, cool. I'm going to give that a go and share my screen, which I want to be. Oh no, sorry everybody, bear with me 1 second. Which I want to be this one. It's all well and good until it doesn't quite do the thing that you're expecting it to do. Great. I want to optimize the clip and then share my screen. So hopefully this works. I just want to make this bigger.
Steve. So in your manifesto, you stated that in order to help address energy poverty in some of our poorer communities, you would work with Homes England on a decent home standard, which will include a comprehensive retrofitting programme to improve insulation and a boiler scrappage scheme. So there's so many issues that could have formed part of your manifesto, but what was it about this particular issue which is important to you?
Well, we are working on delivering on that manifesto, and of course climate and climate change is the existential threat to our planet, so we all have to play our part in reducing emissions. And our city region was the first to declare a climate emergency back in 2019, and that issue still remains the overarching challenge for our generation. So we're looking at areas where obviously we can reduce our carbon footprint. And for instance, in the Liverpool City Region, housing is responsible for around 1/3 of the carbon emissions, which impacts the daily lives of all of our residents. Overall, 13% of our residents are in fuel poverty as well. And there are areas in the city region where that's even higher. And, you know, it's not just about being cold or not having hot water. These things affect people's health and well-being. And, you know, the sort of the daily stresses and life stresses of having to try and find additional money to pay for heating that's literally going through the ceiling or the walls or the doors or the windows. So the previous decent home standard, which Homes England supported our housing associations to meet, that set a benchmark for a reasonable home standard, which we want to work with all of our partners to ensure that it's at least a level of housing that everyone should expect. And that will help people to maintain a good physical and mental healthy lifestyle. So we're working with our partners, we're rolling out the government grant. We are the accountable body for the whole Northwest for retrofitting. So we're doing the first 200 homes, which were assessed last month for energy improvements. But we do know and we accept that it's just the start of a long journey. We need many tens of thousands of properties to be done. But we're not just improving the insulation of homes, we also want to help people in fuel poverty, whilst of course ensuring that we move away from the likes of natural gas so that we can reduce emissions overall.
Brilliant, thanks Steve. And as you say, it is a really long journey, but to be started on the journey is great. The second question from me is that, like elsewhere in the UK, we know there are skills challenges and shortages for delivering this retrofit agenda you're talking about, and the current provision of people with those skills is not aligned with anticipated future demand. So what are the plans for addressing that skills gap across the city region? And what more can the government be doing to support the creation of these green jobs?
Yeah, a lot, hopefully. And I have to say that in my role, most conversations, some stage in the conversation, will get round to what we're going to do about skills. So in my manifesto, I stated that it was my intention to increase the green jobs in the city region. And I'm pleased to be working with local companies to deliver on our initial housing retrofit programme so that we can get some of those new green jobs. We're working with Next Energy, which is based in Knowsley, to carry out some of the assessments. And my skills team are working with colleges and other institutions, private training providers, to ensure that we get that better skills mix to deliver on that agenda. But what we need from government is a long-term plan to ensure that we can, when we invest in those things, it's not a stop-start of funding schemes, so that there's some certainty for businesses to take people on, in order that we can help the industries to develop and gear up to the changes that we want to see happen. And you know, there's plenty of work that's already underway this year to refresh our understanding of what we need for green skills, you know, particularly looking at the likes of skills demand and supply and seeing whether those things align, but creating actions so that we commission skills in a different way as well. That's part of what we're working with our providers to do. We're also trying to build the capacity of the sector. So through our procurement and commissioning, we can use social value to deliver more green skills and jobs. It's generally that what we try to do is to enable the sector to better respond to the climate emergency. So that, you know, the Retrofit Academy, CIC, are working with St Helens to deliver some of those jobs and the work programme. We want them to shape how retrofit best practice can be used. And as I say, the government needs to do more to help us with green skills, retraining, keeping people in work, supporting the transition into the industries of being net zero. that long-term sustainability and support would go an awful long way to help us to do that. And that's why it's great that we work so closely with our members of parliament in the Liverpool City Region.
Fantastic. Yeah, and as you say, that security is something we are talking about tonight as well. And yeah, it's great that we've got so many MPs joining us on the call today. Do you think there are any additional powers you would like to have to promote a faster net zero transition to climate ready housing across the city region?
In all honesty, I'd rather anything be done more locally than, faceless bureaucrats in Whitehall, in all honesty, doing things for us. So what we are doing at the moment is using the powers that we already have in the creation of our Liverpool City Region spatial development strategy. And that's going to assist in setting some of those standards across new build housing to minimise carbon impacts, for instance. We need to get what we're doing right, as well as retrofitting the things that we got wrong in the past. We're working with the other metro mayors to lobby as a cohesive group on national powers, because we're all on that journey together, and we need similar drivers to encourage that support. Enforcement action, the other things that come with it. So funding support, of course, but we need to retain the ability for us to get to our ambitious goal of being net zero carbon by 2040, for instance. But we're waiting for government to publish the heat and building strategy. That'll guide the direction of travel for us, and we'll look at what the suggestions for additional powers for us are in that when it comes about.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully that strategy is very imminent. I know it's been pushed back a few times. But yeah, on that local angle you were talking about, and making sure things happen locally, if people listening today are concerned about the scale of change needed to ensure our homes are climate resilient for the future, what can you recommend that they do to get involved?
I have to say that I live in an old Victorian house, and I have done for the last 32 years. They take an awful lot of time and energy and resource to try to get them to be as energy efficient as it's possible to. So, if people have bought or rented a home that is an old home, then they should now have at least an energy performance certificate. I didn't get it all those years ago, but that's a starting point to see what the issues may be in that particular property. And then the first steps in physical improvements is to look at any leaks, of course. So simple things like put loft insulation in. If it's a Victorian house, it's unlikely to have cavity walls, but if your house does have cavity walls, they can be filled. And then it's about draft proofing then. And you can do things, even in all honesty, in a house like ours, very, very thick curtains do slightly reduce the energy loss through the windows, because they're the old sash windows. But there is support schemes that are out there. There's schemes that the companies run, such as ECO, that could address if you can't afford to do that work yourself. So you need to have a look at that. You can change behaviours. They can make a huge difference. So you can replace just ordinary light bulbs with LED bulbs, for instance. People can get smart meters now, of course, installed to monitor energy use. And you can actually see when you put the fire on or the central heating, just how much energy is being used and potentially is being lost. We need to use all of those things so that we can cut usage. We need to do an awful lot more in our city region to reduce the emissions and cut usage of energy being lost by 5% or more. So it's a big task, but people can take tiny steps, and every tiny step, of course, will help.
Mm-hmm. And do you think people can get in touch with their councillor or their other local politician if they have particular concerns about home retrofit in the local community?
Yeah, I mean, the first port of call to get more information is normally your elected politician. So it's either your councillor or of course, your member of parliament if you need them to delve a little deeper into the detail. But use the democratic institutions. That's what we're all there for. And of course, we will continue to work closely with all of our elected representatives to do everything that we can to help people out, but also to put pressure on national governments to give us, you know, the tools, the levers for ourselves so that we can do more in our own areas. And fingers crossed that they might respond to something if they're truly genuine about levelling up.
Brilliant, great. And on that call to action, I'll say thank you, Steve, for joining us today. And yeah, just really appreciate you giving your time this evening. And thanks for all that you're doing on this agenda.
Brill. So that was that video. I hope that you enjoyed that. I just now need to rearrange my various screens. Sorry, everybody. Let me see if I can move that out of the way. I think I might just need to close that down. There we go. Obviously, Steve isn't here with us tonight to answer questions live, but we will try our very best to put any questions that you have to him by email afterwards. And yeah, as I say, we can try our best to get his responses. So do feel free to please put any questions in the chat, or maybe you've got a question that you think one of our other panelists could answer. I think, yeah, I'll move on now. I think my colleague Aislinn is back, which is great news. We've got the two of us now. And yeah, obviously a huge thank you to Steve Rotheram for taking part in the event tonight. I'd like to now introduce Kit Knowles, who you can see on the screen. Kit is the Managing Director of Ecospheric. He is the founder and director and an award-winning, Ecospheric is an award-winning passive house consultancy, delivering pioneering eco-developments. With a master's degree in chemical engineering and a background in the pharmaceutical and petrochemical industries, he brings practical knowledge in heat transfer and technology integration to the retrofit market. His passion for forging new paths in sustainable construction has led him to develop and build Europe's first certified NRP HIT Plus homes. Kit will be talking about Ecospherics work and the Retrofit Challenge, a case study and how this can be applied across the industry, and also looking forward to sustainable solutions in the built environment. Brill, I hope I did that justice there, Kit, and really happy to hand over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Julia. Yes, I'll just share my screen if I may. Let me know if this is not coming through in any way. Can you see that okay, Julia?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm hopefully going to give you a whistle-stop tour as to one of the key projects that Ecospheric completed, which is Zetland Road in Chorlton in Manchester. And we're going to run through what we did here and how we did it. It's going to be quite brief and quite high level. This was a really immensely complex building project. There was quite a number of years of research and construction that went into this. But we're going to rush through that and get to the point where we can also talk about all the other sectors of the built environment that we're involved with, and looking at having quite a wide breadth of sectors, looking from the light industrial through commercial, residential, new build, etc., etc. So there's all sorts of sectors hit, and there is going to be a sharp focus on retrofit and solutions. So talking about the Zetland Road passive house, this building you see here was originally built in 1894. It's been designed to focus on not only achieving passive house NFIT standard, but we went to one of the later, more advanced standards that Passive House have released called Passive House Plus, which now incorporates some renewables and some management of energy generation on site. And these buildings now have kind of brought your gas and electricity bill from sort of £4,000 of gas and electricity per year. And there's 2 buildings that you're looking at here. So that's each, and they came down to somewhere in the region of minus £43. So it makes quite a dramatic difference when you get to these levels of performance. That said, they are very, very extreme. We're talking about a 95% reduction in carbon, in space heating, and about a 7-fold reduction in carbon emissions associated with the building. So the question is really, how did we do that? And we very much also wanted to go outside of Passive House and focus not just on performance, but look at embodied energy. There's some amazing statistics out there that are rather scary, talking about the impact of forgetting embodied carbon. So we're working with the University of Liverpool at the moment to do a deep dive into the carbon analysis associated with this building. And we are quite amazed by the initial feedback, and that white paper is going to be released shortly. But it's essentially looking at whether or not we built this using, the typical approach with blocks and cement and petrochemical insulations, or whether or not we took a much more advanced approach looking at the kind of natural cellulosic and wood fibered based approach, which is what we did. So this property, as I say, built in 1894, is representative of around about 8 million homes in the UK. And if we do forget to think about when we're retrofitting them, the materiality of it, we can write off maybe 50% of the benefit that you'd get from the operational carbon reduction through forgetting the fact that there is a lot of carbon, or what's known as a carbon burp, associated with the creation of the materials that go into it. So our solution, we focused not only, as I said, on the performance standards, but we looked at creating what would be the world's first petrochemical-free passive house. We also looked at concrete-free development, and we focused very much on minimizing waste. So we had a full retention of all the existing possible fabric. So all the floor joists in the house, the rafters, the stairwells, the brick, etc., were all retained. We also, in using these types of materials, kind of eliminate VOCs. So everybody who buys a couch or a mattress and brings that into their house, you're unwittingly bringing in, 70% by volume, a barrel of oil, and those things off gas over the first sort of 2.5, 3 years. So there's quite a lot of nasties in there. And not only did this building focus on the fixtures and furnishings, as well as the fabric all being free from VOCs, it also looked quite heavily at lime-based technologies and other natural products that are actually capable of sequestering those VOCs and setting them down. We also played around with no central heating as a concept. So we used our ventilation system and piggybacked sort of small heaters that dribbled heat into the air that was incoming from outside, that had been filtered. And so the pollen and particulates and moisture problems had all been sorted out, and then it's delivered directly to where you need it in the building. So you spend 8 hours in a bedroom after all. So how many of you think about ventilation for your bedroom? I want to just highlight with this project, and one of the key aspects was the fact that it stayed inside its existing thermal envelope. So there's a bit of a grand designs fad in the UK. 60% of all construction that occurs essentially is focused on one thing, which is called modernisation. So modernisation, the open plan kitchen, dining, living space, new kitchens, new bathrooms, fresh facade, al fresco living, lots and lots of glass. Those are the sorts of things that make up modern living. And essentially the first thing that everybody does when they move into a building is they shove an extension on the back. And what you're looking at here is not an extension. This is actually recladding the exterior, but maintaining the existing envelope in terms of the thermal line. So the advantage of doing this is that with an average spend of £120,000 per building that an extension is added to, and an average increase in energy demand of 30%, not decrease. This modernisation actually continues to increase the amount of carbon that each of the buildings are consuming, not to mention the carbon burp associated with the materials that go into it. So all of these things are really quite damaging. Now, an average household of a family of 4, let's say, can fit quite nicely into about 100 square meters. Now, these buildings are 200 square meters, but they do carry a particular issue, which is that they're very top heavy because they're essentially 3 almost identical footprints in terms of their layout. So we use techniques like tiny house, which gives us all sorts of tricks to enable us to squeeze a lot in on a very, very small footprint. And get a huge amount out of this building, and saved us having to do any kind of extension. So we can consider things like surface area to volume ratio. You imagine that extension that would have gone on would have 6 sides to it, only one of which was necessarily connected to the building. And in that circumstance, you've got 5 of those 6 sides of the cube losing heat to the outside. Don't build it, you don't have those kinds of losses. The surface area to volume ratio, the building stays more compact. Also glazing, really critical aspect of this is that glass is around about 6 times worse performing than opaque wool in comparison, whether you take it from 100 years ago with a single pane in timber, or whether you come fast forwards into passive house with triple glazing, and you compare those to the equivalent fabrics of an opaque wool, and you're still maintaining that 6 times ratio. And it also happens to be 6 times more expensive per square meter. So all this glass that we introduce causes a lot of loss of energy, but it also causes all of our overheating, and it drives the money into something which isn't necessarily helping us from a decarbonisation perspective. There are a lot of different things we did in this building. We mucked around with chimneys to utilize them for new services. We were the world's first stained glass put into a passive house. So developing that was really interesting. This product here you see as an intelligent membrane. That's the world first too. We were looking at using a membrane. My cat's just dropped up there. Sorry. We were looking at a membrane that mimics cactuses in the desert, in that it can play with variable moisture transfer rates going in one direction versus another. So it can stop the warm, moist air from getting into your building fabric, which can create a condensation risk. But if there is any moisture in your fabric, it can bring that back into the house and allow that to dry out. Playing around with angled glazing, so we can make the most of solar gains whilst managing the overheating. Timber supports as opposed to steel to reduce that embodied carbon. Lots of IWI at the front, internal wall insulation, which is a risky way of doing it. It's more thermal bridging, which means little points of heat loss where all this structure ties through. But this gives us the ability to maintain that lovely traditional facade, which gives us a lot of the opportunity for future heritage buildings. And there are many, many more. I won't go through them all because we don't have time. As you can see, there are lots. If anybody has any questions, we can run through them later. I will just highlight the critical importance of MVHR and ventilation technologies that are focused on heat recovery. These technologies are pivotal to pretty much all buildings in a retrofit form. And again, I'd love to have a conversation about that at some point, about how important and how pivotal that is. So, you know, people ask, what should I do first? And those are almost always the sorts of systems that I put in all buildings as a first step, because it unties your hands so that you can start managing convective and conductive losses elsewhere. Right, some other interesting projects. We have just moved into this building. This is Lim Hall in Lim, towards Warrington Way. And essentially, this is a Grade 2 star listed building. We are trying to work with Historic England under the basis of climate heritage. And we are trying our best to deliver solutions to enable all buildings in the UK to achieve decarbonisation. The threshold for this that we're trying to hit will be somewhere in the region of, we're looking at zero energy, which is a very specific thing, but it basically means that we're going to generate the same amount of energy on site as we're going to consume, which is not passive house certification, but of course we're very, very restricted. It's being Grade 2 star listed, which is in the top 4% of all listed buildings, of which there are 500,000 in the UK. But this is 425 years old and very complicated. So the solutions that we develop here really should allow Historic England to take their first steps into actually delivering on their signed promise for decarbonisation under the Climate Heritage banner. we are probably running out of time, but I'm just going to quickly mention that we are running several PhDs. We have one set up already and running under Lime, looking at all sorts of fantastic solutions and alternatives to cementitious products, cretes and renders and plasters and mortars, and all sorts of stone and brick repair, massively decarbonized at probably around 1/70th of the carbon embodied if I was to take alternative approaches. And we're looking at sort of modern construction methods, but ones that are going to be seamlessly integrated under a heritage basis. So because this is so tightly tied down in terms of control, as I said, in the top 4% most controlled aspect of buildings in the UK. We have air tightness PhD that we're looking at creating what would be the first method of incrementally testing room by room and technology by technology as we install them, which is going to give us a level of granularity of information that's never been experienced before. So that will give us a lot of information, feedback as to not just the holistic nature where we have a plethora of approaches that deliver at the end of the day a decarbonized building, but actually knowing which one did the most and in what order we should be installing them. It's the sort of information that even at the very sort of cutting edge, bleeding edge levels of knowledge, we don't quite know exactly what's going on. And the final one would be in and around the sort of glazing. So you can imagine with 52 window sets in there, there's a lot of complexity that goes into making that work. Another one is around a sorting office, zero energy, zero waste food hall, where we've got all sorts of world first technologies going in there. And we're using vans to deliver food, but also to power the food hall. So 5 commercial kitchens and a brewery will be powered, and a supermarket, coffee roastery, and experimental kind of kitchen, all are going to be powered from vans that are powered from the roof. So this is quite an exciting method of approaching buildings, and we're also filling in energy gaps associated with this using a technology which is an alternative to anaerobic digestion, turning our waste into methane, but very clean, called EMR, electromethanogenic reactors. And that goes through into a brand new form of fuel cell, which uses methane, a methane fuel cell, which is then producing direct electron currents from our green waste. Very exciting. It's very old, 1926. So this is still in the retrofit world. And we have many other projects. I feel that we're probably at the end of our time. So I'm going to move on, but we can probably discuss some other bits and bobs if of interest in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kit. That was absolutely amazing. So fascinating. I feel terrible that we've only given you all such a short amount of time because those are all so interesting. But yes, please do keep coming through with your questions in the chat. We are once again, unfortunately, having some slightly technical issues. And so maybe what I'll do is turn the schedule around slightly, and maybe we will go to the Q&A now, because I don't think I have the next video to share. Yeah, sorry everybody, that's not working. No, so let me come to our first question to the panel, unless maybe my colleague Ashlyn will be able to join and share again in a second. Maybe I'll give it 1 minute and I'll just have a look at some of the questions we've got in. We just have another great one in the chat. Let's start with this one. I think, Kit, you might have put something in the chat already about this, but we had one question in from Emily Williams, and this is for all of the panel. Are there any major policies that will influence the decarbonisation of the housing sector, both retrofitting and new developments in the next few years? Yeah, any policies at either national or local government that we should be keeping our eyes out for, or anything that you would like to see coming? If any of the panelists want to unmute and come on camera, please do feel free.
Julia, can I just explain the link I put in earlier on, this Kialo? One of the things that we've been doing and trying to keep a constant kind of track of is, as ideas have come through, and we've been in discussions with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority or others, because I'm the technical lead for the Retrofit there's a project that was mentioned earlier, the 60,000 properties per year being retrofitted. That project is a retrofit accelerator project, and that's what I'm technical lead on. And that is a kind of a real idea generating forum. And as we kind of look into this, we discover lots of different legislative loopholes and legislation that blocks the transition to a low carbon economy, and also lots of ideas about if we could bring in legislation that would have a big impact. What is that going to be possible? Can we put that to BEIS and others to see if they will adopt any of it? So it's also, Kiala is quite an interesting program because it essentially uses kind of nested pros and cons lists. So everybody can have a bit of an open debate on it, sort of saying on any given idea what pros and cons they are. And then you can even pros and cons somebody's con or pro. So it gives you quite a really interesting way of approaching it. So if anybody's got any ideas, that link there will take them to it and they're welcome to add onto it. But there's a huge number of different items in there that will help people frame this question very specifically, I feel.
Well, thanks so much, Kit. Yeah, fascinating. Did anybody else want to contribute to that question about legislation and policies? Maybe what we'll do is go back to our original schedule. I'm going to ask my colleague Aislinn to share our video from Laura. Laura's our Northwest Regional Coordinator. She sadly can't be here tonight, but she's going to talk us through this new project that we have coming on in the next 12 months. It is called Housing for the Future, and it's fully funded, and we are basically here to sell our support to you and hope that everybody in the audience and watching afterwards is going to be able, is going to take us up on that offer of supporting you to talk to your local representatives about retrofit, climate change, and all of this sort of thing. So yeah, Aislinn, do you want to try sharing that, if that's okay? So everyone, Aislinn's computer is not having a fun time tonight, but we are trying our best. And if not, we can always do a bit more Q&A. Yeah, this looks like it. This looks like the perfect thing. Do you want to give that another go, Aislinn?
Thank you, Julia. My name is Laura, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for the North of England and Scotland here at Hope for the Future. And here at Hope for the Future, we believe that the biggest thing you can do to take action on climate change is to engage with your political representatives, whether it be your Member of Parliament or your local councillor. But that's not to say that meeting with your MP or your councillor is an easy task. And when we have busy lives full of multiple commitments, we may not always feel that we have the time or the skill set to take on this additional responsibility. And that's why Hope for the Future exists. Over the past 7 years, we've been working to support constituents all across the UK to engage with their MPs. And we have a proven track record of empowering constituents, people like yourselves, to feel confident and equipped to go on to meet their MP from across party lines, with 90% of the MPs that we work with going on to take at least one tangible action on an issue, whether it be sustainable transport, flooding, energy, or home retrofit, like we're talking about this evening. Over the next 12 months, we'll be running a programme designed to support you to engage your MP in upgrading the Northwest homes to be fit for the future, sometimes called retrofitting. As part of the programme, we offer a whole range of free support to help you feel equipped and empowered to engage your MP through letters and meetings. The three main ways we can help you over the next 12 months is: 1, providing tailored training workshops to give you the skills you need to effectively engage with your MP, using our tried and tested common ground approach to relationship building and coming up with smart, tangible and concrete asks that you can ask of your MP. Secondly, we'll be creating briefing resources on home energy efficiency and retrofit, tailored to your local MP and your community, with input from our expert partners. And thirdly, we'll provide one-to-one or small group support and guidance every step of the way along your whole journey, from arranging advice, giving you advice on how to set up an MP meeting, helping out, you to put together your meeting agenda, and helping you to follow up once the meeting has taken place. And these are just some of the ways that we can help you to engage your local MP on home energy efficiency. So if you are at all interested, we'd love to hear from you and see how we can start working together. And though this project's only just getting started, we're so pleased that North West MPs have already been getting involved. Kim Farron, Liberal Democrat for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, couldn't be with us this evening, but he sent through a pledge ahead of time outlining his support for a strategy from the government to lift people out of fuel poverty and ensure climate resilient homes. We've also supported constituents to have productive conversations with Mary Rimmer MP following the St Helens event earlier this year. And we're so pleased to have other North West MPs here with us this evening who are here showing that we can create a regional mandate for action and for change across the North West. As we know, we need the finances, resources and skills to be directed to the North West to tackle fuel poverty, create jobs and reduce carbon emissions from homes. And that requirement for a long-term strategy is something we've heard mentioned multiple times this evening, including from Steve Rotheram, Metro Mayor for the Liverpool City Region. The more people that speak up for the skills, resources and funding needed to retrofit the North West homes, provide certainty to businesses and increase the availability of those all-important green jobs, the more likely that our voices will be heard. And that's why Hope for the Future exists, to help you make your voice heard with your local politicians. And as it's been said already, this event marks the first stage of a 12-month journey. So if you've heard something this evening which inspires you to do so, to take that action and get your voice heard with your local politicians, we'd love to hear from you and start working with you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm handing back over to Julia now for the question and answer session.
Brill. I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, and obviously a big thanks to Laura for showing that. If you have any questions about that, please do send them my way and I'll try my best to answer them, but we can also pass them on to Laura. We have got a few resources too, which I will post in the chat to go along with what Laura's just told us. We have also got, I think maybe we will go to the Q&A now. But we have actually just got a pledge that we received, another one, as well as the one that Laura just told us about from Dan Carden. Thanks for bringing that up, Aislinn. Yes, we've asked MPs to submit pledges ahead of this event this evening, and we'll also be doing so afterwards. And this is lovely from Dan. He said he's calling on the government to provide the strategy needed to lift people from fuel poverty, reduce emissions from our homes, and provide an abundance of green jobs. So yes, it's really fantastic that MPs from across the region are already speaking up so that we can ensure climate ready warm homes for the future. And obviously that's something that we're going to continue to do over the next 12 months of this project. Great. So even with all of our various technical difficulties, we are actually on time. We've got a bit more time left still for our Q&A. And so I'm just going to get up some of the questions. We had a couple of questions from people about when we're talking about retrofit, the balance of that, of is it ever the case that houses get too hot? I know, Kit, that you mentioned actually something about what happens at night time and about heating and cooling bedrooms. So yeah, there's one question, have there been problems with houses being too hot at night after insulating them to a high standard? And somebody has also asked, sorry, I'm just looking at the questions, as well as reducing heat loss from buildings in cold weather, we need to protect them from excessive heat in the summer. And will retrofitting allow for both of those aims? So thank you for Chris and Susan for submitting those questions. Does anyone want to come in on that flip side of retrofitting, where we often talk about houses being warm, how it also helps us to keep houses cool in hot weather?
Happy to answer that question, Julia, if you like.
Yes, please.
Yes, so essentially, Passive House is a very, very useful standard because what it's doing with its PHPP, its Passive House Planning Package model, is it very accurately measures overheating as well as the requirement for heating in the winter periods, and it does it on a kind of an annual basis using local climate models, so it can be very, very accurate, understanding energy transfer across the fabric of the building. So, of course, you can create situations as you increase the performance of buildings where you can lead to overheating. And typically where this is happening is when you get a lot of transparent elements being accommodated within high performance buildings. Equally, low performance buildings quite often overheat. In fact, at the moment in the UK, in terms of our housing stock, we are currently, and it doesn't make any sense at all when you're thinking about, Portugal, Spain, Italy, or whatever, Greece, we're #1 in Europe for potential overheating in our buildings. So why is this happening? And the reason this is happening is that it's something that's massively avoided in design terms. And from an architectural perspective, it is something that we need to be considering as strongly as the energy demand side in terms of insulation and keeping the heat in winter. So these two items need to be carefully balanced. We have the tools out there to enable us to do it. And we have a lot of tricks that enable us to get light in the winter period and use the beneficial heating that can come from transparent elements. But to block it out in the summer period where you get too much of it. So these sorts of things can be done passively using sort of shading systems, and you can use deep reveals or louvres, brise soleils, these type of technologies, or even things like deciduous planting schemes where you can put trees in front of windows that essentially drop all their leaves in the winter, so allow that sun to flood through, and are a full block to the sun in the summer period. So these are the sorts of techniques that we're using. And you would have seen on that Zetland Road property, what we did there is what's known as anti-stratification. So essentially, as heat rises in that building, it gets much, much worse the higher up the building you go in terms of overheating potential. So you would have noticed that there was a lot of glass on the ground floor, kind of a medium amount on the middle floor, and very, very little glass on the top floor. And that's essentially to counterbalance that kind of energy flow. And there's all sorts of other systems in that house that help passively cool it. But yeah, it's a critical, I hope that answers the question, but it is a very critical point for us, particularly us in the UK.
No, that was really, really helpful, Kit. Thanks so much. I'm going to come back to a question from the chat earlier on now, which is for you, Johnny, if that's okay. And that was about green mortgages. And I think there was another question earlier on about householders and especially people from low incomes paying for this. So the question is, green mortgages have been talked about, and if you think they would be compelling enough to achieve the change we want, and a little bit more about green mortgages, or about paying for the costs of this.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. Yeah, I think just to touch base on the green mortgages quickly, I think they can be an important part of this and that they're one financial incentive, but the challenge at the minute is, one, green mortgages aren't that widely available. A lot of lenders still don't have a green mortgage offering. Secondly, offering green mortgages in the current context of the housing market means they're not as effective as they can be, because essentially interest rates are so low anyway that for a lot of people taking a green mortgage doesn't seem worthwhile. And quite often as well, a lot of green mortgage products are targeted at essentially, if you buy a new property and that's of a certain energy efficiency standard, that's when you can access a green mortgage. So there would really need to be some way of rethinking them so that actually it applies when you remortgage or buy an existing home. So for example, you get access to a preferential interest rate, either up front on the agreement that you agree to undertake retrofit, or you have the option once you bought the property and retrofitted it, that you can go back to the bank sooner rather than later, so well within the usual term of a mortgage, and reapply for a green mortgage. So they can be a tool, but they need to kind of be a bit better planned out and thought through. And then I think more widely in terms of wider incentives, I think there's a tough challenge here in that, you know, if you look at the mix of tenure in England and, you know, across the UK, the majority of people, you know, own their own home. But actually within that, you know, you get a lot of, you know, lower income homeowners who won't be able to afford a lot of this retrofit work they need to undertake to their property. And then perhaps more significantly, you've got a lot of people who they don't own their own home. So essentially the decision of how their house is built, how it operates is largely taken out of their hands. There's a whole question around regulation and how you manage property standards, which obviously links into this, but just to focus specifically on the finance side, I think in those cases, you are going to have to see some sort of cash incentive to those property owners, so those landlords, those social landlords and those private landlords to get them to undertake that retrofit work. That could take the form of low interest loans. So essentially they can, you know, carry out that work and, you know, it's pretty cheap to do, and then they can benefit from having a better property and it's not costing them too much. Or alternatively, you could think about ways in which government can essentially support that funding. I think where that's most obvious is with social housing providers, because a lot of them operate social housing, which, you know, isn't exactly, but in many ways is kind of publicly, you know, supported housing stock. It's paid for through, you know, grant funding and kind of the social charitable purpose of housing associations. So I think in those cases, you can think about ways that you can access funding from central government to fund it. But I think really what I want to show with that, and I appreciate it's quite complicated and there's lots of different things going on, that really we're going to need a mix of financial options. And we need to think about how those different financial options will not only work across different tenures, but also towards different households within those tenures. So it's making sure that those households who, you know, would struggle to afford to retrofit their house, you know, no one's going to come in and say, you've got to do this, or, you know, something bad is going to happen. It's about making them have, you know, access to positive incentives there to encourage them to do that sort of activity.
Yeah, that was so helpful, Johnny. Thank you. I know what it's like trying to get my landlord to fix my washing machine. So, you know, yeah, I can definitely see the argument for incentives there. Brill. And then to bring Jan and Stephanie into the conversation, I know it's been a while since your presentation, but we did have a question earlier. Jemima asked, Jan, have you done any engagement with stakeholders on the demand side? And yeah, the demand from homeowners, are they talking to you about this, about the demand to have skilled workers to be able to take to do this work and do the retrofit?
I think our experience, sorry, hi everybody. I think from our experience, we had a lot of demand from homeowners to get involved and achieve and get the grant for their homes. However, what was lacking was there was insufficient skilled workers and insufficient approved suppliers and companies to do the work. And I remember somebody telling me that they'd had to get a company from Cornwall to come up to Manchester to do their work. It's difficult and a bureaucratic process to go get the grant. I know certainly from a study that was done in Manchester, about 10 homeowners said that they would be willing to pay for retrofit. However, the view was that once they understood what the real cost of that was, that would reduce significantly. And I think it is that, you know, incentives and some sort of grants to get this work done is going to be critical.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jan. I think you've frozen for me, but it seemed like it was just as you were finishing your point. I hope so. Yeah. Great. Oh, you're back. Brilliant. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll just do our wrap up. And another question from Jemima actually is, what impact does retrofit work have on the value of homes? Is there any data and evidence out there for estate agents and for other people to show that actually if you do make this investment, it increases the value of your home by X amount?
Got a really interesting answer for that, Julia. The Passive House Institute in Germany, they did a study across Europe looking at passive houses specifically, which is obviously a very extreme form of decarbonisation in both retrofit and new build. But they were finding equivalent buildings in the same area, same location, same kind of format, size, scale, its condition, etc., was selling at around about 15% premium over the previous unrefurbished and non-passive house certified type buildings. So there is definitely a markup. Now, the Zetland Road properties that I presented on earlier, they also they sold on a road in a commercial environment, and they saw quite significant increase. They were against another property that sold at exactly the same time, same size, newly refurbished up to the hilt. We were making somewhere in the region of an extra 120 grand on top of that. So it was quite a significant markup. Now it's only one case, so it doesn't mean a great deal, but we are seeing it time and again on every single project that we're involved with, where we do take those thoughts to the extreme in terms of taking action in decarbonisation. You really do see a very specific niche of the buying market who are really, really keen to find these sorts of buildings, and they're just very, very few of them. So it does add the value there for sure.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really, really great. Amazing. So I think that I will just start our wrap up then. Just thank you to everyone for all of your brilliant questions. If we didn't get the chance to answer them tonight, we are going to keep note of them and try to answer them and send out the answers in our follow-up email. And we'll also be sending you more information about our project and the work that Hope for the Future does. We are big believers in making climate campaigning as open and accessible as possible, and each of our training sessions, which are all about how to work with your MP on climate change and on these sorts of issues, those are all free. We offer this support for free to make sure that anybody can have their voice heard on issues affecting them and the planet. And so if you'll forgive us, we've got a really, really quick video from one of our fundraisers, Kerry, who's going to provide a tiny bit more information on how you can support our work should you wish to.
Hi, I'm Kerry and I'm one of the fundraisers here at Hope for the Future. I really hope you've enjoyed our event tonight and are as excited as we are to hear about the launch of our new Northwest Retrofit project. This project's a really special one for us, as it's the first time we've taken an issue like fuel poverty and really focused in on it as a way to engage new people with our work and support them to get their voices heard by their MP on an issue which is not only really important in the fight against climate change, but will also help to create more equal societies and a better quality of life for thousands of people across the country. As some of you may know, we are a charity, and so our work and projects like this are only made possible thanks to the support of our funders and from people like you, giving us donations to help us deliver our work and be more ambitious and more creative as we approach the country's 2030 climate targets. If you've enjoyed our event and want to get more involved with our project, please consider giving us a small donation. And if you'd like to hear more about our work and different ways you can get involved, please feel free to sign up to our general newsletter, check out our website, or get in touch with one of us and we'd be more than happy to give you more information. Thank you again, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening, and thanks so much for coming.
Brill. Thank you so much for bearing with us for that, and yeah, for hearing our message. I have put the link in the chat should you wish to donate, but yeah, we're really just grateful for you to be here with us this evening. And yeah, huge thank you. It's my job now to reiterate our call to action for the evening, because we're hoping that you're feeling inspired to engage your local politicians on home energy efficiency and retrofit, because we're asking them to provide green jobs for our region, lift people out of fuel poverty, and ensure that our housing stock is climate ready. Hope for the Future is on hand. We have a whole team ready to support you in the journey, from researchers to helping you write your agendas for your meetings. We can give you training, and yeah, we're really hoping that you will get in touch with us afterwards. You will be getting an email from us, so you'll have our contact details, and we would really, really appreciate it if you did stay in touch, because we want to expand this network and reach as many MPs in the Northwest as possible. All that's left to say is a huge thank you to our wonderful speakers. Each has been really, really interesting, insightful, and we gave them quite a hard brief to only talk for 10 minutes. A huge thank you to our constituency team and to our Hope for the Future team who are behind the scenes, especially Aislinn, who has been so brilliant despite all of the technical difficulties. A huge thank you to all of you to attending as well. there is going to be hopefully a feedback form that will pop up in your browser after the window closes. So if you could fill that in, it really, really does help us with our funding and our reporting, and it's not too long, I promise. It also includes a bit of information on how to get in touch with us if you'd like support in engaging your MP. So I'm finishing with 2 minutes to spare, yeah, I hope that you really enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your Friday night and your weekend. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and hope to see you all in our inbox soon and an event in the future. So thank you very much, everyone.